They don't even have sights on their rifles. It's weird as hell.
Hello, hello. Is it? Is this working?
You don't need optics. See, if there's no sights on your rifle, you'll hit your target for fear of missing.
Well, you'll hit your target if you have enough guns firing automatic downrange. That's the rule of thumb.
Well, it's that joke, like
Okay,
that picture of that guy.
I think we're live now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Okay, new version of OBS threw me there. I'm not going to try to go on cam tonight because I don't want to turn the lights on because it got really, really warm today and it's hot in this office. But how's everyone doing?
Come on, Shane. You could be on OnlyFans.com.
It's just really hot when you turn these studio lights on. That's just, there's no getting around that.
Yeah, why do you think? Yeah, why do they? Yeah, why do you think they Why do you think they use mashed potatoes in ice cream commercials? Yeah, that's an interesting thing I learned about those commercials. So many people say, how come the food never looks like, the images? That's because more than often, that's not food in the picture.
Yeah, because food would spoil under the studio lights.
Yeah.
And it's also why even when there's when there's a scene of people eating, you don't see them eating that much. And it's not just because, they're delivering dialogue and everything else. It's because most of the food that, they have there is not real because it would spoil. So when they have to eat something, they usually they have it just offset in like a cooler or something like that. They run it out to them. They take a bite. They generally don't even swallow. They have a bucket next to them.
Yeah,
they just spit it out. Because they do so many takes, you don't want to eat, 20 hamburgers.
I've seen some interviews, like from some people that, from like some models that have worked in like those food commercials. And they said, after filming that one commercial for Burger King or McDonald's, I could not eat a cheeseburger for several weeks afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Just because
I'd blow my brains out.
Yeah,
if I had
well, John Sim in John Sim in The End of Time, where there was those scenes of him, eating the burgers like really, really, really fast. That they had like 20 burgers, and he was just sitting there with a bucket next to him, just eating until he couldn't put any in his mouth anymore, and then stop, spit it out, and do it again. And they just cut it out between them, and he was just so sick of hamburgers after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually saw a funny parody about that, and I'm pretty sure you can relate to this, Shane, because you've directed a couple of indie films, but it shows what people think acting is really like, and it shows like this epic scene and all that, and then it goes, what acting is really like, and it's like this: Macbeth, I must challenge you to a duel. Cut, lighting wasn't agreeing with me. Start over.
Well, and a lot of it.
Please stare at the green tennis ball.
And a lot of it is just down to the editing and things like that. Like, oh God, I forget which movie it was. I'm pretty sure it was Humphrey Bogart. And there was this one shot where everyone was saying, oh, look at how great, an actor he is. There was all this, longing on his face, and you could just feel the thoughts in his head. And in reality, the director told him to look bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thing I've learned with editing is, like, I do my videos sometimes and I'll go over and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of dead air. So I just cut it out, and it actually takes like 30 seconds off of my videos.
There's usually a script. I know it's in Reaper. I'm pretty sure there's one in Audition, and you can tell them like any bit of silence that's longer than, a second, cut it down to a second and just have it go through and remove all that automatically.
Oh, that's Reaper, right?
Reaper, and I think Audacity has it too. I think most of them have something like that, to remove silence. So. All right, in the chat, we've got David R., Consumer 23, Gyroder wants us to talk about Ukraine, and I'm sure we will, Consumer 23 is talking about, ice cream being mashed potatoes. SKM's there. Fishron says, sorry I couldn't make it, but today is my birthday, so this stream is one of the best gifts I got today. Thank you so much, Fishron, and happy birthday.
I got something to celebrate. I got something to celebrate. In 3 months, my probation will be over.
Yay.
Yay.
Do you know if you'll be able to own a gun after that?
I don't know. I'm going to text my PO sometime and ask her to see what's going to happen. Like, will I be giving it back when my probation is over, or do I actually have to petition the court and they got to review my case and all that?
But I mean, what about like buying a different one? Or would you be stopped from buying it because of the background check?
Yeah, because
if you were convicted of a felony, you can't because you have to
I don't know if it wasn't a felony, but like it was still domestic abuse they claimed, so who knows? Because I don't know what Wisconsin is, but I do know a lot of states are like that, where it's like if you're convicted of domestic abuse, regardless, even if it's just a misdemeanor, nope, that's it. You can't own a gun.
Yeah, I'd ask your lawyer about that and see if that's something you can appeal, because now that the whole Rittenhouse thing is over and all eyes are off Wisconsin, maybe they'll be a little more generous about that.
I do kind of wonder if the Rittenhouse thing resolved, would I have stood a better chance, because Rittenhouse flat out killed someone and, and it was clearly self-defense, I mean, they have to set a precedent, Oh,
they got embarrassed from that.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a national embarrassment.
Yeah.
Hello, Sid. Yes, I made the Bogosity podcast music myself, so some of that was me playing, some of that was samples.
Bet you can't play the Seinfeld bass line.
All you need is one of those keyboards with the bass sound on it, and just play a bunch of random notes, because that's really all they did. That's not a real bass playing that.
Yeah.
This is funny. SKM says, on a more lighthearted note, so what cuisine do you guys like better, Japanese or Chinese? We were talking about that before we went live.
Yeah, about how a lot of Chinese food is actually Japanese food that was appropriated by Chinese American store owners when the Japanese were interned during World War II.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's really all that much difference, other than I think Japan has more seafood. Other than that, I don't think there's as much of a distinction as a lot of people, make it out to be. I think that's more of an American restaurant thing.
90% of what Japan does, like their food, culture, and all that, if you trace it back far enough, guess where it goes back to? China.
Yep.
Even sushi goes back to China.
The language is
but China never did as much fishing as Japanese did, because Japan's an island, so go figure.
But the interesting part is when you trace it back, a lot of the original Japanese alphabet changed because I think it was Shinto or Buddhism was introduced into the country. Actually, Buddhism was introduced in the country, and that mixed with Japanese folklore, and that became Shintoism.
I mean, it all traces back.
Yeah.
And yes, SKM, I used to be in a local band in Greensboro called Reason and Instinct, when we did prog rock and some post-punk. Progressive rock.
I love Green Acres.
Green Anchors. That's actually a pretty cool band name, Not Acres, Anchors.
Not Acres.
Trump. When
Green Acres is the place to be.
I've never seen that. I've never seen that show, but a friend of mine has told me, like, he saw it, and he says the funny irony about the show is that it starts out with the husband wanting to be a farmer and the wife hating it, but towards the end of the series, the wife actually enjoys being a farmer, and the husband's like, oh God, why did I leave the city for this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's like, I hate the hustle and bustle of the city. I'm going to live a simpler lifestyle as a farmer, only to discover that being a farmer is not simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were doing all sorts of stuff like that. The Beverly Hillbillies was all about that, having to think like, oh, we're rich and we're living the high life, but it's just such a different life than what they were used to, and trying to, navigate around, this completely different culture.
Agricultural life can be very hard, and when I enjoy it when people are like, oh, we need to go back to the 17 or 1800s when people respected this and that, and like agriculture and respected the environment. I'm like, no,
no,
you go back
that
to the
wasn't what it was.
1700s, nobody respected their environment.
How many
basically dump stuff into the River Thames.
Yeah. How many shows like that have we really had after the Rural Purge? Because the Dukes of Hazzard is the only one I'm thinking of since the Rural Purge that had anyone who was, farming or Southern or anything like that.
Yeah.
Nah,
the Rural Purge was when they got rid of Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, and all those, and they just said, "Oh, we're getting rid of all those."
Dukes of Hazzard, I have never seen it. I honestly...
I mean, it's a comedy. Just because it's an hour long and there's no laugh track, don't go thinking it's a drama. It's a comedy, but if you understand that, it's a pretty fun show.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I know is there was controversy over the Confederate flag.
Lee.
It was like one of the least racist shows on television, and they actually had more black guest stars than even later shows like Seinfeld and Friends.
Yeah, all I know from the Dukes of Hazzard is the General Lee car, and during like when they were going to cut to a commercial break, there'd always be that guy saying, "Oh, them Duke boys is in some heck of a trouble now."
Waylon Jennings, yeah.
Yeah.
He also sang the theme song.
Those Duke boys in trouble now. They're gonna need
about now the old Duke boys were
Yeah.
But the idea is that it all has to do with the moonshine production and ridge running in the rural South, and Boss Hogg, who's the county commissioner, is running his illegal enterprise, and generally it's about the Dukes trying to stop him and foil his plans and everything.
Them Duke boys is up Cowpie River without a pal. How's they gonna get out of this?
You know what I find funny?
You would think that at some point the county would know to buy better cruisers before they go chasing the General Lee.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they went through so many of them, maybe they didn't have the budget. So.
Thing is, I kind of looked into a lot of history about prohibition laws, and a lot of the monopolies, in Maine, the only way for grocery stores to get liquor is to buy it for the state of Maine, and that's actually a remnant from prohibition.
Well, here in North Carolina, if you want to buy anything other than beer and wine, you have to get it from an ABC store, they're run by the state. Yeah, ordinary grocery stores can only sell beer and wine.
By the way, someone posted saying
grocery stores.
Oh, sorry.
I said grocery stores can sell liquor. There aren't any liquor stores up here, but the distributor is the state of Maine, pretty much.
Oh. Oh yeah, yeah, as they say, a temporary government program. Hell, the ATF is just an evolution of a government agency that was founded to enforce prohibition.
It's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Yep.
Before the 1970s, it wasn't before the 1970s. It wasn't called the ATF, but that's what it was. It was a bureau that worked for the Department of Interior, and all they did was they went around, found moonshine whiskey, and broke it open with hammers and all that.
Yep.
Yeah, and then after Prohibition, they're like, okay.
Which really had more to do with monopolistic practices, because moonshine was more easily made from corn grown by people in mountainous regions because it was easier to transport and sell than just the raw corn. And that was actually going way back to the whiskey tax and the whiskey rebellion was about that, because if you wanted corn whiskey, well, if you were an Eastern farmer, you could just sell the corn directly to people for them to distill it themselves. If you were in the Western region where it was more mountainous, that was so difficult to do. It was just easier to convert it to whiskey first. And that's what happened with the whiskey tax. It ended up being a tax on the Western farmers to the benefit of the Eastern farmers. And exactly the same sort of tax. They just fought a war.
Yeah. I think I saw a parody at one time, which is showing the Whiskey Rebellion, and it shows, them saying, and it shows, them saying, we declare war on these whiskey moonshiners, and one of the guys is like, oh, but founding fathers, didn't we just fight a war over no taxation without representation? And Hamilton's like, yeah, but this is different.
Yeah. And Louis S. I also made the music to the Quickies, and I don't know if anyone noticed that, but all of the different styles of music to the Quickies, they all have the same bass line.
Huh.
Yeah, so something, in all honesty, Shane, I sometimes wonder, would America actually follow through with its promise of being a free marketplace if we didn't have frickin' Hamilton as a founding father?
Yeah.
Because he is, because when you think about it, he is largely responsible for all the loopholes within the Constitution that a lot of politicians, will say, oh, there's a thing here that says we can ignore the rest of the Constitution.
Well, and he's pretty much one of the big reasons why there was a Constitution to begin with, as opposed to just revising the Articles of Confederation to fixing the problems that people were experiencing with it.
Yeah.
They didn't want them. They didn't want them to scrap. They didn't send them up there to scrap everything and make a whole new thing. They just wanted them to revise the Articles of Confederation. Then they come back with this whole new document, and people are like, "Wait a minute, what the hell did you just do?"
Oh yeah, I mean, like you said, basically all they wanted to do was take the Articles of Confederation and say, okay, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to still keep the Articles of Confederation, but we're going to apply the rules so now state and local governments have to follow them too. And you said Hamilton and some of his rich friends were like, oh, no, we need a new system of government entirely.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was the video I suggested on Alexander Hamilton was by PragerU. They tried claiming that Alexander Hamilton was a free market type, but you go into his history.
Didn't I do that one?
He was mercantilist.
Didn't I do that as Lord Killian? I think I did that one.
Yeah, you did that.
He wanted, if I recall correctly, he wanted, American exceptionalism, and he said he wanted that when we started training, we wanted the same, tariffs, embargoes, and custom duties, that we just fought a rebellion because the British were imposing on us. He just wanted to impose all that on other countries.
Yeah, if you want good videos on stuff like that, on Hamilton and the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, the 10th Amendment Center has a lot of good videos on that.
Yeah, Hamilton wanted a monarchy, I believe, right?
Well, yeah, he asked George Washington to become king, and Washington said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting, the founding fathers, how, like, some of them were more monarchy leaning, while the others were republic leaning, while some were more kind of like a pseudo aristocrat leaning type of thing.
A lot of them just wanted to break away from England to set up their own England. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, the problem with that was that some of the founding, the founders of the original, Congress, especially the ones that supported Hamilton, they came from those aristocratic backgrounds, and they're like, yeah, we want to be independent from Britain, but we still want all our aristocratic privileges and riches.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading a book. I was reading a book and it kind of delved into it was kind of like one chapter was kind of like it was a critique of not Rothbard, but Mises and Rothbard a little bit for their kind of they didn't like republics, but at the same time they kind of leaned towards it in kind of like New Liberty and stuff like that. And it kind of goes into how a lot of the founding fathers were not really into the whole I think it was kind of the republic thing. They really kind of saw themselves as kind of like aristocratic in a sense. I forgot the page.
Well, I mean, the thing is with a lot of ANCAPs, when they say, when they say we're in favor of Republic, that's more of them saying, listen, if we absolutely must have a government, then at the very least it should be a Republican form of government, because then at least the boundaries, for individual liberty would still be theoretically in there. Whereas if you have a democracy, and we pointed this out many times, all it is just you're at the mercy of the majority. If 51% of the people say you no longer have a right, you lose the right.
Well, the problem with a republic as well is the classic sense of what our republic was transformed under the Wilsonian doctrine, which very much eroded aspects of the Constitution. I think it was I was reading Illiberals by Thomas C. Leonard, and he goes into how Woodrow Wilson thought the Constitution was obsolete and stuff like that. But I think like the thing about a republic is you can try to set it up as good as you can so it like you don't have the problems of democracy, but eventually the power is gonna coalesce into what we see now.
Well, to be fair, Thomas Jefferson had the perfect solution to that. He said in his thing, I mean, because so many people love to say, "Oh, did you know Thomas Jefferson said that the Constitution should be changed every 20 years?" No, what he said is that the Constitution should stay the way it is, but in order for it to be maintained, people need to overthrow the government every 10, 20 years.
Yep.
Yeah, as he said, the tree of liberty must be seeded with the blood of tyrants and patriots.
Which, interestingly enough, under the Smith Act, the founding fathers would be considered terrorists.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you brought it up. One of the first things that happened after George Washington left office and Adams took over is he said, "Okay, let's make it so it's illegal to criticize the U.S. government."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I I was in high school and I learned about the Smith Acts and all that stuff, and I was just like, okay, how to screw up, how to miss the point of what, how to miss the point of everything 101. Hey, let's do
Yeah.
the Alien and Sedition Acts.
Yeah.
So SKM wants to know how you guys coping with the inflation and gas prices.
I have no idea. I mean, thankfully my boss got me a gift card, for as a thank you for hard work. But yeah, it is ridiculous. I filled up my gas and it's $50, and it was $50 for a full tank of gas.
Yeah, it's up to I think $4.25 here.
Yeah.
Well, there's an easy solution. Just buy a Tesla.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, because that's so much cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what that reminded me of so much, and it just shows how much I hate, some of those rich people. It reminds me of that episode of South Park where they're trying to get smoking, and the guy's like, "You know how dangerous smoking is?" And he's like, "Listen, buddy, I just worked a 14-hour shift at a sawmill. I just finally got a day off, and I need to relax. So when I need to relax, I go to my vacation house in Hawaii. I ain't got a vacation house in Hawaii. Then go to your vacation house in Mexico." Yeah.
You heard what Biden did, right, with the TikTokers? He had all those TikTok bimbos come to the White House and gave them all the talking points to put on. And now all these just completely, vacuous, I just can't think of a better word than bimbos, are talking about how it's all Russia's fault that the gas prices are high, and it's clear none of them had even cracked open an economics book in their life, nor would understand it if they had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the real reason why the news media is saying World War III is on the horizon. It's simply because the coronavirus is no longer something they can point at. Yeah, remember the
Yeah,
coronavirus?
that's kind of a
Oh,
yeah,
that
I
that
Yeah.
that is so
recently,
that is slow
got
last
over it.
month, Chris. That is so last month.
Yep, it's like yeah, it's like yeah, I'm pretty sure that's probably what they were thinking. It's like, oh my god, the coronavirus is evolving into just a cold virus. It's no longer dangerous. We won't have an excuse anymore to keep all our political power and inflation. Mr. President, Russia just invaded Ukraine. Oh, thank God.
So SKM wants to know why they're
I
pushing electric cars so hard, and the narrative is this will save us all from global warming. But there's two things that need to happen for that to be the case. One is we need to start building more nuclear plants and not shutting them down like Biden administration is doing with his new version of the NRC, which again
yeah.
is peopled with they're pretty much all, I think, environmental, scientists and things like that. No actual nuclear engineers or anything like that. Certainly none
Yeah.
with any experience running a reactor. But that's the
Yeah.
first thing. And the second thing is that electric cars are going to have to be feasible for the poor and working class, which means they need to be able to buy cheap used cars. And this is important, they needed to be repairable cheaply by small independent mechanics, which is something they can't do right now. Your battery goes out, you're looking at $20,000, just to replace the batteries. Whereas, if we had right to repair, then you could just take it to an independent mechanic and they just have to swap out, the cells that were bad.
But we own the codes in the computer in your car. So so you're trying to say you own numbers. Yeah.
JC says, don't electric cars produce more pollution than gasoline powered cars? It all depends if the electricity is generated with coal, then yeah, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I've heard people say, it's like the cars themselves produce less pollution, but the manufacturing and maintenance of the car is not,
Yeah. Oh, especially when you're talking about things like strip mining the lithium for the batteries.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, strip mining allows for safer mining. I believe I was reading this that a lot of deaths from mine-related accidents were cave-ins, but strip mining and open mining kind of avoids that problem.
Well, and not just cave-ins, it's just the fact that the air quality down there is so bad.
Yeah.
And that causes all sorts of lung diseases and things like that. You end up breathing a lot more CO2 than you ordinarily would.
There's a lot of xenon gas in uranium mining that creates problems.
Yeah.
So it still kind of reminds me how everyone was saying, Russia nuked Ukraine when they bombed a nuclear power plant, ignoring that that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how any of this works.
Well, they didn't even bomb the plant. They just sort of, took it over, and there were reports of like, oh, they're working there at gunpoint. Well, no, they're working there with armed guards, around there, but working at gunpoint, implies that they're, enslaved, but no, they're just continuing to do their jobs. They're just doing their jobs with Russian soldiers around.
But...
So I've actually heard from someone saying that, another thing too is that contrary to what you see in TV and video games, even a nuclear bomb wouldn't explode if you shot it with an explosive. It's actually designed that unless it's armed, it is not going to go off no matter what. Because seriously, would you want something that's capable of not only destroying an entire city, but it could trigger a cataclysmic war? Would you want it to be able to go off just by flicking it with your fingernail?
Yeah.
Well, there was an incident in, I think it was it was a nuclear silo in the South in the 1990s under Clinton, or I think it was when Clinton was governor, so the 80s, where a Titan missile silo caught on fire and it didn't go off. There was an explosion, but it wasn't nuclear. And they looked at it and they found out that, oh, all the components had basically been melted to the point where, yeah, if they were very close.
But I mean, I know the stuff they make for reactors, they've done stuff like, flown rockets into them and tried to blow them up, and it doesn't even scratch them.
Yeah, they tried putting a F-4 Phantom through a concrete wall that represented the wall of a nuclear reactor, and it couldn't get through. They've tested it against airline simulations, and I mean, those things can withstand a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't really...
Well, that's like one thing they were saying after 9/11. It's like, well, what happens if they, if the terrorists fly a plane into a nuclear power plant? It's like, nothing. Well, I mean, it's bad news for the people at the plant, but,
Yeah.
Sure, the conning towers go down, and there's a slight chance it might do something bad, but compared to just blowing it up with conventional explosives, not that much.
Yeah. Even if you used conventional explosives, I don't know, maybe if you destroyed the right systems, but even then I don't think that would be enough to trigger a meltdown.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only way you could trigger a nuclear meltdown is you'd have to send in a special forces team, kill absolutely everyone in the plant, make sure, cut off the communications to make sure no alarms sound off, and then mess with the controls to make it overheat. But there's no way you could practically do that without someone figuring out, saying, "Oh my God, the plant's going to melt down."
But Darth,
and even if it does melt down. Even if it does melt down, everything's in the containment building. It's not getting out.
Oh yeah, some people.
Die.
It's so funny how so many people treat 3 Mile Island like it was a big nuclear disaster. When, if anything, 3 Mile Island showed just how safe it was, because 3 Mile Island was a really bad meltdown. It was a worst case scenario, and nothing happened.
Yeah, even the people who worked at the plant didn't get a big dose of radiation.
Yeah,
and even 40 years later, not a single death from cancer from that, even though everybody I talk to this on social media denies it up and down the blue streak, and they give like these false examples, and it's like, no, that's not scientific review. That's just someone claiming they got cancer from 3 Mile Island. Where's the proof?
Oh, yeah. It kind of reminds me too of like they try to say like, this person, who was near the Chernobyl site, they're having cancer now, and we take a look at the person, and the person's like in their late 60s, early 70s, and I'm just thinking, typically it's around that age when you're more susceptible to getting cancer.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the people who have been living in the exclusion zone all this time, they're no more susceptible to getting cancer than other people. I mean, they've had challenges. They have to know like what forms of wastewater and groundwater to avoid and things like that. They've had to learn how to live with
Don't go in the hot spot. Don't go in hot spot areas.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's like what I said several times in a podcast, in a live stream a long time ago. It's like, it always reminds me of that funny thing about how people say in the zone of alienation, there's this thing called the elephant's foot, which is molten, radioactive metal. And if you so much as get in the same room as it, you'll die from radiation poisoning within 5 minutes. Yet there's pictures of people, around it wearing bare minimum protection, and they're all fine.
Well, that's if you touch it directly, but it's been going down in radioactivity over 50 years.
Yeah, that's another thing that a lot of TV shows and media also falsely attribute, is that they're like, oh, radiation will linger for tens of thousands of years, when in actuality, it actually dissipates really quickly.
I mean, the kind that sticks around for, tens or hundreds of thousands of years is the fuel.
Yeah.
It's the actinides, and once you burn all the actinides, you're just left with basically elements that are lighter than radium, and they'll go away in a few hundred years.
That's actually what
you just have to run it through a breeder.
That's actually what one person, who was reviewing Fallout said. One inaccuracy about the Fallout series is that while yes, some of the pre-war nuclear sites would be radioactive in general, by 200 years from the war, all the radiation from the bombs, it should clear up.
Yeah.
It would, but at the same time, they were the older style nuclear weapons, where bigger nuclear weapons, they can, I believe, most of it gets dissipated in the stratosphere versus kind of nuclear weapons with a lower mushroom cloud height. It distributes the fallout more because it's in the wind.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you should not be getting
I
your
mean,
lessons. You should not be getting your science lessons from Fallout, because Fallout's just a game, and like I said, I like playing the games, but there's a lot of stuff with the lore and all that makes negative 10 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about, and when you're talking about building new nuclear plants, it's the Generation 3 plants they would be building, which are walk away safe. The absolute worst thing happens, you just walk away and the reactions stop and you stop making electricity.
Yeah.
That's the absolute worst case scenario with the Gen 3 plant.
Yeah.
Practically, you could miniaturize something equivalent to a nuclear reactor, and it could power a whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, they have SMRs that are ready to deploy. I think they're going to deploy a natrium reactor in, I think, Wyoming, on the site of a closed down coal plant, which is a good proving, because you can just use all the same turbines and everything else from the coal plant. You just put in the molten salt loop, drop in your SMRs, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Also, real quickly on the subject of Fallout, it's one thing I've heard that's very inaccurate about the subject of Fallout is that it was caused by a war between the United States and China. But I've heard from a lot of people, that have actually analyzed the Chinese military, and you know what they've said? If nuclear weapons were taken out of the equivalent, China would stand very little chance against a war with the United States.
Oh yeah.
Like, people are like, oh, but the Chinese, they're big, they've got all these ships and that. Yeah, but the quality of their men and equipment is crap compared to the US.
Yeah, remember the McNamara fallacy.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like there was a report from, I think it was China Uncensored, how a lot of the conscripts in the Chinese military can't even fit into the tanks because they've grown either taller or fatter over the period of liberalization in China, because people get more food and stuff like that. And the tanks were designed for malnourished people.
Oh, okay, I gotta go back to work, but I just got one more thing I gotta say, guys. Speaking of Fallout, I hear they're making a TV show on Amazon. Want to bet they're gonna change the lore, so instead of the United States and China going to war, it was the US and Russia.
Yeah, it's Cold War again.
Well, that, and it's because it's like, oh nope, we can't offend the Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
we'll
bye,
see you,
guys.
Chris.
Yep. Hang on.
Yeah, but you have SMRs, which are small modular reactors, and they're somewhere in like the 300 megawatt range, and they've got designs for MMR, the micro modular reactors, which are in like the 30 megawatt range.
What's kind of crazy to think about is you could order radium and that material before, I think it was 1950. You could just order it straight out as a private person. Scientists literally just ordered their uranium and it was shipped to them.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a while before we're at the point where you just bury a briefcase in your backyard and it powers your home for 100 years. That's going to be a while.
Well, I've heard Marie Curie's possessions are so radioactive that they won't be at a safe level in about 200 years.
Yep. Well, because she was doing all sorts of stuff with radium.
They didn't know uh, about the dangers of radiation. A lot of the original scientists ended up getting lymphoma and cancer.
Yep. Well, that was like, when they
Ironically,
invented X-rays, Thomas Edison kept X-raying one of his assistants and X-raying his hands over and over again. And the guy's hands just ended up deteriorating just from all the damage from
yep,
the X-rays.
the exposure.
Yeah, from the
Plus,
ionizing
there wasn't
radiation.
really like there's an amount in an X-ray that is safe and one that's just totally screwed up, and they didn't know that back then. They didn't
Yeah.
know about shielding.
Yeah, and he was just like, turning it up to 11 and just bombarding him with radiation, and not because no one knew at the time that was going to cause problems.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I've noticed about like power companies is they're very monopolized. In Maine, for example, there's Central Maine Power, and there's a couple of smaller power companies, but there was a corridor that was supposed to be built through Maine, and people ended up voting it down, and it was kind of I was mixed on it because I don't like the monopoly law on it, but as a libertarian, I'm for the free market. But if they were to give that to a private company instead of Central Main Power, which is essentially just a quasi monopoly, it would have been way
Mm.
different. But I don't
Well,
know,
just give
those
people a
government
choice, because here in North
projects.
Carolina, we don't have a choice. You've got Duke Energy. Where I am, you have Energy United. Out on the eastern part of the state, it used to be called CPNL. I forget that. I think they changed the name. I don't know what it's called now, but you don't have a choice. If I could like choose between Duke
Yeah,
Energy and Energy United, it would be one thing, but you're just stuck with wherever you are. Hey,
yeah.
Scorch.
Asnov Battalion? What? Oh, Ukraine. Gim was asking about that.
Yeah. And I keep bringing that up to everyone who's like, the free market and monopolies. We need to stop the monopolies. We need to stop monopolies. It's like, how come you people never mention power companies? Well, we gotta have
Yeah,
government doing
power,
those because the free market
water
can't do it. It's
companies.
like, well, then shut up about monopolies.
Well, I mean, Bell Telephone was one of the biggest monopolies in the
Yeah.
country before being deregulated in the 80s, and everybody is like, "Oh, these phone
Oh,
companies are this and that," and it's like,
I
there was
remember
only
that.
one phone company.
I remember that.
There was
Everyone
only
was like,
one.
oh, well, the quality's going to be terrible and it's going to be, so expensive and you're not going to be able to get good service. And it was exactly the opposite.
Yeah. Thing is, to improve quality, you really just need to take away the subsidies from these subsidized industries and let competition do the
Yep.
work. And eventually, competition will improve customer service and all that.
Well, and usually with things like cable and power, it's not even subsidies, it's direct laws. It is against the law to compete with them. But
Yeah,
you don't hear people, people go screeching about net neutrality and all these things, and we need community internet and whatever. But they don't say anything at all about just getting rid of these monopoly laws and just letting private companies come in and compete.
because the United States has had a history of monopoly laws. I think it was one of the, not the first Supreme Court decisions, but very early in its history, it ruled in favor on, I think it was a steamship company in New York,
Oh yeah,
where
oh god, what was it?
it was a ferry service.
Not Marbury v. Madison. I know the one you're talking about. Was it Gibbons v. Ogden?
I can't remember.
But I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
And it's just what infuriates me a lot about the Supreme Court is how the general welfare clause, which shouldn't have been there in the first place, has been construed to the point where they can take property for a private company, just give it to a private company, and the private company doesn't have to fulfill their obligation to even build on it. I think that was Pfizer, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, that was Kilo Venu London.
Yeah, and like I don't like eminent domain. No, nobody does. But under constitutional law, it would have been different if it was for a park or something like that. But it was
Yeah.
just giving it to a private agency. It doesn't make sense under the living document interpretation or the originalist.
Yeah. And Scorch is saying he was told that increasing prices is creating inflation, when of course it's the other way around. Inflation results in increasing prices.
Yeah, that's the thing I've been noticing is like a lot of people are not ignorant of economics, but they've been taught it in a way that just kind of peddles it for like
Yeah, there's a difference between ignorance and being misinformed. And these people are actively
yeah.
misinformed, which is why it's so difficult.
Like I've been recently doing an economics lesson series about like economics, and what I started out with is time preference. And
Yeah.
some people have a kind of wonky view of time preference where time preference essentially, if I were to say that somebody has a low time preference, that would mean that you would rather forego immediate goods for future goods, while a high time preference is foregoing wanting it here and now. But it's just something I've come across as people kind of get it backwards. So I did a
Yeah,
video on
I
that.
can never remember which way is which.
Then I did on money. Money is very interesting. I saw your video on like what is money, and it was
Yep.
very it was great. I kind of did my video along those lines, and
And
it's
that
just
is the
people
standard
think,
stuff you'll get in an economics class. So much of stuff in the videos like this is exactly what you'll be taught in a macro class, and yet, people are all screeching, "Oh, you're just one of those crazy anarchists. This is just all, misinformation."
yeah,
And,
I learned it in economics class in high
yeah,
school, like for the most part what money is, but then they go into like the Keynesian idea of what like fiat money and stuff like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Keynesian. Other economic schools had fiat money themes
yeah.
too.
But I mean, we're
With
seeing that a lot. We're seeing that a lot
I
today with cryptocurrencies about how they're not really money. It's like, okay, which of those 4 criteria does it not meet?
Yeah, I can see
Okay,
the
some of
skepticism
them, I
towards
will give you, some of them
um
have fungibility issues. I'll grant you that one.
yeah. It's I think people give Peter Schiff a very bum rap. Uh I think that on some things he's great, on other things he isn't, but he is kind of he is kind of right on a couple things. Like I prefer silver and gold. I prefer silver because I can basically, it's physical, tangible, etc. But
Yeah.
still, it's not my preference may not be what another person has. So
How
that's
you
where I
gonna how you gonna
disagree
buy
with
stuff online with gold and
him.
silver? I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
would
where
be
I
one thing
disagree with Schiff on.
if we still could have the e-gold cards, but they shut all of that down.
Yeah, they had a private currency that was shut down, Liberty Dollar, I think it
Yep.
was, or Freedom Dollar.
I still got some of my silver liberties because
Oh,
those are still, even though it's been shut down, those are still fine because they're 1 ounce of 999 silver. So
yeah,
it's still the silver content.
I have 10 ounces of silver I bought during the inflation bid.
Yeah.
I'm mostly I don't I think I'm a combination. I like cryptocurrency and I like silver and gold, and that's what I diversifying in my opinion is a good thing.
Well, and like silver and gold would be better if, like, we have the nuclear war and you've clawed your way up, out of the radioactive rubble, and now you need to try and rebuild an economy, and you've got, these little bits of silver and gold that you can trade with people after that. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but basically anything that takes out, like, the electronics, if, some real bad solar flare happened or something and took out everyone's electronics, you couldn't use cryptocurrency.
Well, I've heard it claimed that cryptocurrency can be traded without electricity or Wi-Fi, but
Well, it's possible, yeah, but
it's possible,
not
but
really.
at the same time, the crypto infrastructure is very reliant
Yeah. That's what it's
on
built for. That's what
electronics,
it's made for.
and it's kind of like I I understand hard wallets. Hard wallets, you could do that, but it's
Well, that's what they did with back in the day with those physical bitcoins. They've got that little chip
yeah.
in them that verifies that yes, this is a bitcoin, and then you can trade those around.
Well, the thing I kind of when a lot of the things that was going down in Venezuela, a lot of people were pointing towards subversive cryptocurrency, and yes, I agree, but a lot of it was claimed that they could do it without electricity and all these things, and it's kind of like
Well,
difficult,
they
but
have had it, thanks to largely the experience in Venezuela, where you can send and receive Dash over text because, first of all, a lot of people, didn't have smartphones in Venezuela. Most of them have, the old feature phones,
flip
and
phone.
they can text. But the other thing is that the internet is run by the government. And it's really unreliable, and it's just so much more reliable for them to send text. So yeah, you can send and receive
Yeah, and
Dash
I
with text
saw
messages.
some people point towards that and say, "See, you don't need electricity to send these transactions, but still, it requires a
Well,
phone that
you
has a
you need you
battery with
need you need
electricity."
electricity, but I mean the electricity, because people in Venezuela, they have, those big, like, 200,000 milliamp hour batteries or whatever, that have the solar panels you just
Oh yeah,
unfurl, and if it's a nice bright sunny day, that'll be charged up in like 3 hours, and they just keep their phones charged off of that, because the
uh,
electricity can
Skim
be
just
so.
said. Skim just asked me, "Doesn't silver have medicinal value?" Silver is used for
I,
medical purposes, but
I
I'm
think
not.
I think there are some topical silver compounds.
But if you have uh let's say you go to moneymetalsexchange.com, not sponsored by the way,
Yeah.
and order a bunch of silver, and you think, okay, this you're still gonna have to, maybe get a knife and scrape off some flakes or something. It's a
Well,
raw good for
they
sure,
sell
but you're
like
still
this gold that's, I forget how much of gold it is. I don't think it's like a full ounce or anything like that. But it's got these little pieces that you can break off, and the pieces you break off are, I think, 1 gram or something.
yeah. I think Pipsqueak said it best. Physical currency has obvious advantage of not needing electricity, but digital currency is infinitely portable. Trade-offs.
Yeah, it all depends on what scenario you're talking about. If you're talking about a scenario where all the electronics are down and you just got to try to deal with everyone locally, then it probably is better to have gold and silver. But as long as there's electricity, and as long as there's,
Well, in
especially
Fallout,
if
they
you're
use
wanting to do
water.
things, especially if you're wanting to do things like, buy things from, instead of trading directly, just go to the stores and buy things from merchants and order things online. Cryptocurrency is a lot better for that.
Well, in the game Fallout 1 and 2, they kind of it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of economics in those video games where they go into uh, the hub, for example, it's a thing in the first game. They use water as currency for a little bit, but then they realize, oh,
Mm-hmm.
water's bulky. It's not that, so then they switch to gold coins, or, they switch to gold coins, but they also switch to bottle caps. With bottle caps, there's no machines to make soda bottle caps anymore, so that creates scarcity to it, and
Now
then it's a medium of exchange.
the bottle cap thing has been a thing that, economists have just used as an example, going back decades, actually back when, pretty much all of your drinks came in bottles and you had bottle caps. And they were saying that if you had this kind of, post-nuclear society and no one was making bottle caps would make very good money. So yeah, the bottle cap thing goes way back.
Yeah, or soda tabs or something
Yeah.
like that.
I remember soda tabs.
Which they used to have the little key on them too,
Yep, and you
like
had to
beer
pull the
cans and
entire thing off. Yeah,
then the free market came up with,
the pull
the
tab, yeah.
regular cans, and it actually saved a lot of waste
Mhm. Well, I mean,
'cause it's attached to the can.
people would like just discard the thing and they'd just be laying around all over the place. And there were even, and I have no idea why people were stupid enough to do this, but some people had the bright idea of they take off the pull tab and then they just drop it down into the drink. And then, of course, they get it in their mouth and try to swallow it and have to go to the hospital.
Yeah, the one thing I am skeptical of is a lot of environmentalists claim that, uh, I think it was that bottle redemption programs brought down pollution, and it's just no, it's just a tax on itself. That's
Yeah. Well, it wasn't really a tax. What happened was they would add like 5 cents or 10 cents or something to to the price of every soda, and if you brought the empty soda bottle back, you'd get that back.
yeah.
And so
Skim wants to
the
know with
bottling companies
bullets.
would the bottling companies would do that just because it was a lot easier for them to get the the old bottles, sterilize them and use them again than it was to, blow new glass and everything.
Yeah. Gim is wondering if bullets would make good currency. I don't really think so because there's so many types of bullets out there that
Yeah.
if you were to have 5 bullets, for example, but you wanted to trade it with another guy, well, if he has an AK and you have an AR-15, you have 5.56. Well, he
But I
might
mean,
not have a rifle chambered in 5.56.
even if you're talking about like, oh, our standard is going to be the 223 Remington, those come in all sorts of different, qualities and everything.
Yeah. So it's something that would represent that bullet would be a better medium of exchange or something. It's
I don't know.
just
It's
anything
just,
but bullets because
yeah, I mean, you don't really have a unit of account there. You don't really have divisibility and fungibility.
you could break out the primer and the powder, but that's just new goods. It's just
Yeah.
plus what do you do with bullet casings as well? Once the bullet's expended, it's you could reload it, but for somebody scavenging, that's not really
Depends on how easy it is to get cartridge reloaders.
yeah. That's just it's kinda interesting, that kind of whole post-apocalyptic thing when you think
Mm.
about it with economics too. It's, in the Fallout game, there was the NCR had the gold standard, and what happened was this group called the Brotherhood of Steel ended up destroying their gold reserves, with laser weaponry or whatever, and what happened was they had to switch to fiat currency, and in the game, the fiat currency has a lower trading exchange than, let's say, a bottle cap. It's actually very it's actually interesting. The writers actually took the time to get into, like, what the economics of a post-apocalyptic universe would be like.
You could probably do grains of black powder as a unit of account.
You you could, but there's also the chance of, the powder igniting.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't sound like a very good idea to me.
What would be a better
But
currency would probably
bullet currency could be delivered at high speeds.
yes, yes, very high exchange rates. Well, the Metro series had ammunition as a currency.
But I
Well,
mean,
that's more of a
anything will work in fiction because the writer can make it work.
yeah. Oh, full complete cartridges. Yeah, I don't know. I think like
I don't
for
know,
a
because
writing
not
perspective,
all cartridges are the same. Even like the same caliber. Like if you say, okay, we're going to
yeah,
standardize the 9x19 Parabellum, but again, those come in all sorts of different ranges of quality and everything.
yeah, different grain sizes. It's kind of the problem with barter economy as well because I kind of explained in my video. It's like imagine trying to find somebody who wants let's say you have eggs or muffins. Imagine trying to find somebody who wants the muffins. They don't want it, but they want like I don't know, a pen. So you go find somebody who has a pen and trade them for the pen.
Right. Yeah,
It's
I
very
mean, just
crazy.
that's why you don't have barter economies. Once you get above, as long as you're below Dunbar's number, you can have a gift economy. It's really when you get above that you got to figure out something else.
Yeah. If you have, like, a village of, like, 12 people, let's say, in,
Mm.
like, a post-apocalyptic thing, it could work, but at the same time, you're still gonna run into
Well,
somebody who doesn't want the meat.
well, I think it's pretty much accepted now that Dunbar's number is somewhere in the neighborhood of 150. So as long as your village is lower than that, you can just have a gift economy where I mean, just kind of think of like the small communal village where, everyone chips in and does stuff. You can do that because everyone has a social connection with everyone. Everyone knows everyone else. They know their
Yeah.
names. And if someone isn't pulling their weight, then you can, socially shame them or decide you're not going to do anything for them or whatever. And once you get above Dunbar's number, that starts getting unworkable.
Oh, has anyone seen the new, Batman movie? Or
I have not.
have you seen the new Batman one? Hello?
Yeah, I have not.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've heard the Riddler is,
Hmm.
pretty like, it's PG-13, but it's pretty, like, gnarly.
I don't know. The DC films. I mean, the Marvel movies have had their problems, but DC, I don't know what's the matter with them. They just
I
can't make
think
a good
the
one
problem
lately.
too is a lot of the meddling by the studios as well when they Zack Snyder cut. I have not watched it, but I've heard good things, but they've kind of it had the same problem The Thing from 2011 had, where they did all these great effects, but then the studio didn't like it, so they had to go in and redo all the effects.
Yeah. I heard,
Which I heard
what
they
was it? Was it one of the
was
Wonder Woman films that everyone's wanting the Snyder cut or whatever? Or are they making fun of the Snyder cut? One
it
or
was
the other.
Batman versus Superman, I think.
Uh,
No, it was Justice League, I
mm,
think. I'm not sure.
I
Suicide
don't know.
Squad just I watched that movie and it was just like the older one, and I'm just like, "No, just no."
Yeah.
Like Birds of Prey too, it was just like, um, I ended up I ended up wanting to see it with one person, but they couldn't make it or whatever, but I ended up, seeing the trailer for it, and I might see it, but, a friend of mine, he saw it, and it's like, yeah, not that I would not rate it a good movie.
Yeah. Bradley McPhee says, my country's raising the minimum wage and is looking at every factor except unemployment. Gee, imagine that. The
Wow, I
very
didn't know a
thing that minimum
government
wage causes.
wow. There's actually I've been reading a lot more economic literature, and there's actually a good paper by this guy named, Hendrik Hagedorn, and he did a paper called "A Model on Austrian Economics," and a lot of people criticize Austrian economics based on the lack of mathematical models, but, well, that's the very point, but he kinda created a toolkit to kind of plug Austrian theory into kind of like numbers as well. It's actually a pretty good paper.
Well, Hayek said, that it was good to use that to show the relationships between different parts of the economy. But as far as modeling is concerned, the fatal conceit, as he called it, is, in thinking that you know what the variables are and you can put in one variable and do it without all the other variables changing on you. And it doesn't work like that. They're trying to make it physics, and it's not. It's game theory.
Yeah. There was, in the paper, he kind of took aspects of what the neo-Keynesians tried to do and what the Chicagoans tried to do, but he kind of applied it in an Austrian way, and it's very unconventional. But it's actually a pretty good work. But the problem is a lot of those papers, they're great papers, but you have to end up paying $100 for the research paper. It's kind of ridiculous.
I didn't see this. I didn't see this latest Joker with the design where he has like the green triangles above, below, and below his eyes, if that's the one you're talking about. But he's talking about it was too serious and dark to be Marvel. I think that's the thing. They just both have their own character to it, and as long as they don't try to be the other, as long as Marvel doesn't try to be dark, and as long as DC doesn't try to be the, big flashy superheroes.
Yeah.
Like the Batman is always best when he is at his root, which is stealth. It's not just run in, guns blazing, facing down the bad guys. It's stealth, it's sneakiness and stuff like that. Is when they get away from that.
Yeah.
And they try to make him Spider-Man.
I found out a lot. Yeah. I found out a lot of the special effects in movies that have a reputation for CGI actually are very practical. Like the prequels, a lot of them are models, but they combined it with CGI. But the CGI was kind of a little iffy, so everybody thought that everything else was a model.
You want to see
DC and Marvel movies.
You want to see the big point about that? Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock, with the exception of scenes where they're like fighting on the sides of the building or something like that, where they're all CGI. Most of those with his robotic arms are practical. And you can tell that in the way it moves, in the subtle little twitches and mechanical catches that it makes. That's almost impossible to do in CGI and get right.
What they have been doing, and this is what they did in Dune, was they use a noise filter to kind of get the, the little sand rats they did in Dune, if you've seen it.
But it's, it's
corridor crude.
No, noise filters don't always, because noise is kind of random, and a lot of things have character that isn't random. One thing that I've done is I actually just grabbed my camera, I stuck a whole bunch of tracking markers on the wall, and turned off the stabilization and everything, and just, held the camera up there and got my own little camera shakes on there. Because traditionally what you do in CGI with the camera shakes is you just put in, the random noise on it, but it doesn't look the same. It looks like random noise. It doesn't look like the character of someone doing that. So I did that. I got my own camera shake in there, and I've got it on like a 10-second loop, which is, way too long for you to notice any repetition. And I mean, it just looks so much better when you've actually tracked your own camera movements and then you put them in the CGI environment. It just looks so much better.
Yeah, I've been trying to get into CGI more, and I did a CGI background for my videos, and it's actually very entertaining to kind of make your own world and planet and textures and just see it come together. And I've been trying to film outside and then kind of do like the animation in Blender as like transparent PNGs and do it as an image sequence to kind of put characters outside. But the problem is shadows. Shadows and lighting.
That's the worst. That's always the biggest challenge is matching the lighting.
What what I thought about doing was taking a camera and kind of filming of where the light is kind of in a like from multiple angles and just kind of like put something on the ground that's real that casts a shadow so I can just put
Yeah.
like go in Blender, put the shadow in where I think it is, and just plop the character in.
What a lot of CGI artists do is they just put a chrome ball there in the middle of the scene, and then they use that to just cast the lighting over the scene. SKM CGI, for the most part, is not more expensive than practical. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but usually CGI is a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Well,
Although it's interesting with this next Blender Open movie, they're going for complete photorealism, including the human characters, photorealistic human characters, without doing any mocap. And I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out. I think they're calling it Heist
Blender
or something Heist, but
compared to Blender or like how is the Unreal Engine? Because they've been doing a lot with that with the Mandalorian.
They're two totally different things. Blender is 3D, design and rendering, and Unreal is a gaming engine. So they're two different things. They don't compare. A lot of things like people, making models and things like that in Blender and then importing them into Unreal or Unity to use in the gaming engine. But they're two different tools for two different purposes.
Yeah, but I heard that the Mandalorian was using I think it was aspects of the Unreal Engine to do the the major problem was when you do green screen or blue screen, it's very hard to like in real time put the environment in, but they found out a way to put it in there real time so the director kind of has a picture.
They project it. Yeah. They don't use green screens, they just project it. It's actually similar in concept to what Stanley Kubrick did with the Ape Man scenes in 2001, because he sent his photographers around to take pictures of these desert landscapes in Africa, and then he had the ape men on the set in Hollywood, and on the back was just a screen, and he had the image projected from the same lens as the camera was recording. So you didn't actually see it like lighting up the characters and everything like that. It just lit up the background. This is the same idea, except just writ large, with a full 3D environment.
Yeah.
I got an interesting discussion. Zoomics says, honestly, hate that all these bread tubers, Marxist grifters, and crimes against humanity deniers get shit tons of algorithm attention and tons of views when you've been here for a decade and only have a niche following. And as SKM says, yeah, prior to the algorithm, it was a lot better. And then they started doing the wokeness in their algorithms, and that's when everything started stagnating. When even my own wife has trouble finding my videos,
I've been looking into Odyssey.
It's pretty cool.
It's just it doesn't have like the kind of, I don't know if it's gonna go the way of BitChute, because BitChute took off for a little bit, but it's just kind of like had its own niche.
Well, BitChute never really supported anything other than like their own special little group of creators. And I've been told for years and years that okay, well, we'll let you monetize anytime now. Anytime now we're going to turn on monetization for everyone, and that's been several years and they haven't done it.
Yeah. VidMe was a good service for a while.
VidMe was great.
It was great, but they couldn't compete with YouTube.
Well, they couldn't get the viewers. They got the creators, but they couldn't get the viewers.
Yeah. I used VidMe for a while, and I loved it because they just did not do what YouTube did when in regards to I got less copyright issues from VidMe than I did YouTube.
Yeah.
But Odyssey looks pretty promising. It's just kind of that whole wasn't BitChute built around the kind of torrenting type thing, like
I
peer to
think it
peer,
uses WebTorrent, yeah.
which kind of it lacks on every time I use BitChute, uh it just the quality was not for me anyways like as good.
Yeah. They've been working on that with Odyssey. I don't know when they're going to get transcoding up for everyone yet, but a lot of the bigger channels have transcoding where you can like watch it in 4K, yeah, high def, 720, 480, and all those.
Well, Odyssey compared to BitChute, it's light and day, in my opinion. Just
yeah,
the baseline quality for Odyssey is just better.
Well, I mean that's actually Library doing that. That's the back end.
Yeah.
Odyssey is just a web front end for Library.
Yeah.
And I personally think it works a bit better if you use the Library app and don't try to use Odyssey in a browser. It's just more convenient to use it in a browser, so that's how I generally do it. But.
Yeah. I wish they would come out with an app for it, though, on mobile.
Yeah, there's a Library app on mobile.
Really? Shit.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah.
There was this you know Milton Friedman, right?
Oh yeah.
There was I gotta send you this paper, like, through Bogasti, but it was a paper where it was by the New Economics Institute. It's very left-leaning, and they tried claiming that Milton Friedman, tried helping abetting segregationists and all that stuff, and they said they did all this, then they tried to worm their way out of it when people called their baloney by saying, "Oh, that may have not been the personal views of Milton Friedman, but the effects were he advocated for school choice, and oh wait, Virginia had a school choice law during the 60s motivated by segregation, well, this and that. But when you read Capitalism and Freedom, Milton Friedman goes into how you could use school choice against the segregationists to transfer white students into black schools."
Yep, it works both ways.
And
yeah, just go to the Google Play Store, just type in LBRY and it comes right up.
Yeah. I may not like agree fully with Milton Friedman on kind of like the Chicago school, but I think there are definitely areas where it's pretty good. It's just kind of interesting. There was a discussion with Walter Block and David D. Friedman, and they had a debate over the Chicago versus the Austrian, and it was kind of interesting. They saw eye to eye on a couple things, but there's just a key couple issues that they are just like they vehemently disagree on.
Zoomic says every Shane Killian video has at least one Tucker Carlson clip and recommendations. Maybe I should do more Tucker Carlson debunkings then.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, I don't like. A lot of people like him. It like I got a lot of relatives who kind of like Fox News, Tucker Carlson, and that stuff, and I'm like I get it, but at the same time, he's very dishonest at times. Even when he is honest, he can be dishonest.
Yeah.
Like, when he's correct about an issue, okay, he's correct, but he's kind of correct for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
Oh, Fourth Root. Hello.
Yep.
Oh, hey, Fourth. How you doing?
How's everybody doing? I'm doing swell. Got another kid on the way.
Oh, how many is that for you?
Oh, good for you.
Well, I've got my eldest stepson, and then three. This will be the third biological.
Wow, getting in that gene pool.
Yeah, I owe it to the world to reproduce. That might sound cocky.
Well, you've done more than replacement fertility, so you're contributing to the overpopulation problem.
Right. Yeah, after the second kid, then you.
Yep.
Yeah. If you ever want to read that article, I just put it in Livestream Planet.
Okay.
It's a funny article.
I don't think the world has a population problem yet, or
no, it doesn't.
Until there's like 100 billion people or more.
Certain areas have population issues, but there isn't anywhere near a worldwide overpopulation problem.
Soylent Green is people.
What areas are you referring to? Like,
think about Tokyo, places like that, where you just have a bunch of people jammed up together.
I suppose, but their quality of life isn't all that bad. And Manhattan is about as densely populated. And,
well, yeah.
The reason why it's densely populated, it's not that people are just having lots of babies there. It's that they're moving there. People like living close together. So
yeah, but I think that's the thing. People are doing that, and they're looking just in their own areas, and they're kind of extrapolating that to the rest of the planet when those are really the exceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're not going to really have a population problem. We're not really going to have a population problem unless starvation starts to go up again, which I just don't see happening with the way technology is going, because basically we have the technology to turn like every square foot of this planet into farmland, and then even go vertical and have multiple layers of agriculture, high efficiency, high density agriculture, and that can sustain hundreds of billions, if not trillions of people.
Yeah, but you're talking in a lot of cases about some pretty expensive technology there, because they've looked at things like that. I think more as a thought experiment as anything else. But like, if you were to have a moon base, of course nothing grows on the moon. Could you sustain a population on the moon with vertical farming? And the answer is yes, but it'll cost you.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Well, the technology, our industrial capacity and technology is exponentiating at a rate faster than the human population is growing. So I think, the inevitable result is like, at what point does technology reach its limits? And I think it's Dyson sphere, or at the very least, when the Earth is tiled in vertical farms. That'll be the population limit of the planet, but for the solar system, it's going to be a Dyson sphere.
Well, the affordability of technology too is a question.
But I think if we do have increased starvation, it won't be because of anything like that, population or technology or anything. It'll be because of governments getting oppressive. Because that seems to be the only reason for starvation in the world today, is oppressive governments.
Yeah.
Well, the Irish potato famine, it was a lot of the reason why they starved is that the British government was holding the other agricultural food products from the Irish.
Yep. And they were exporting so much food from Ireland.
And Ireland was basically just a series of plantations.
Yep. They were growing the food, they just weren't allowed to keep it.
How many potatoes does it take to kill an Irishman?
How many?
None.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that joke.
Well, the Irish, they were like they were kind of coerced into converting to Protestantism because if they didn't convert to Protestantism, they wouldn't get their rations.
Yep.
Which the thing that kind of confuses me, like about Protestantism and Catholicism, the split is over the whole issue of what wasn't the veneration of idols that was the issue?
The iconoclast controversy, yeah.
Because there was the council of it wasn't the Council of Nicaea, it was the second Council of Nicaea, I think, and they kind of said, "Oh, it's okay to do this, have saints and art and statues and stuff," but I think it was the Eastern Church basically was like, "No, no, no, we're not
Yeah.
going along with that."
The Eastern Orthodox Church, which actually split off before Martin Luther.
It's kind of interesting because the Catholic Church claims they're the so-called original church, but I think it was during the meeting of Nicaea, they kind of were just one of many churches that were out there. Plus,
Yeah.
I think it was the Gnostic Church was the first.
Yeah, the Catholics basically pretty much went to war against the Gnostics and wiped them out.
Because there was a debate with I forgot the guy's name, but they called him a heretic, and Saint Nicholas actually slapped him, believe it or not. But he basically said like maybe Jesus was a man, but he may have been the Messiah, but a man, but had powers and stuff like that. So I think like what he was basically saying is God is superior to Jesus because you can't really have like both here
But basically,
is
Jesus is God's homunculus.
yeah. Because it's like the Catholics try claiming kind of like that Holy Trinity thing, and they were like, well, that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no one has
Which
ever been
it's
able
kind of
to.
interesting.
It's pretty much been a joke, even among Christians, that no one can explain the Trinity.
Yeah. So Jesus, so the fuck. So the Holy Spirit is not
Real.
I forgot it. I forgot
Good
it.
answer.
I forgot it. It's something like Jesus is not God, but God is G it's weird.
I think the whole point of the Holy Trinity is to create an inherent contradiction that it's somehow virtuous to believe this contradiction, that it's three separate things but also the same thing.
It's
and
the emperor's new clothes is what it is. It's the emperor's new clothes. That's exactly what it is.
Like I believe in Christianity, but I don't
Off your mind
I believe
the possibility of accepting a contradiction. And if you can accept the contradiction that's so blatant there, then you can accept any kind of other nonsense that they throw at you.
I believe in Christianity, but I don't necessarily like the organized churches and all that. Like I may there be God or Jesus? Yes. Do I believe in it? Yes. But it's just I don't see the point in the whole churches and Catholicism. I just think people should believe what they want. There's no harm
The
to it.
point the point is controlling people is the point.
We should make a concerted effort towards believing what they can objectively determine to be true. I think that you have a moral responsibility to align your beliefs with truth, because only through aligning your beliefs with the truth can you act on those beliefs in a way that's productive to you or to anybody else.
I could see that. I could see that point.
By the way, Thursday's Lord Killian video was a response to a Christian.
Yeah,
well, same. When you really started YouTube, it was mostly debunking Christian videos and creationists, right?
Well, there were creationists, there were moon hoaxers and flat earthers and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to take up a larger fraction of your content early on, but I think you kind of said what you needed to say.
Yeah, there just hasn't been a whole lot new from them. It's just been kind of the same old, and they're also nowhere near the significant social force they were 10 or 15 years ago.
They've been displaced by the social justice warriors.
Yeah.
In 2006, 2007, there were a lot of openly anti-gay preachers and Christians there talking about it. Their attitudes have definitely shifted over the last, God, how long has it been? It's been 15 years that I've been on YouTube. 16 years that I've been on YouTube.
The Westboro Baptist Church and the Jehovah's Witnesses used to be kind of huge because I did skeptic content back in the day, and my attitudes religiously have changed, but the main thing was I think it was the Jehovah Witness show. It was like the cartoon series they tried imitating Pixar, and they did a bunch of other things. It was just kind of like the evangelicals, the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, I remember that one. The graphics were so horrible. Oh God, it was so bad.
It's like Caleb. It's like they do issues like, oh, this kid is playing with a toy wizard, and like it's somehow evil, and the Jehovah's Witnesses spend like 8 minutes explaining it. And it's like any other person, even if they're a Christian, would kind of be like, yeah, you're kind of taking that way too, like if God exists, like, let's say, I don't think he would care if Caleb was playing with a wizard toy. It's just make believe,
Yeah. I have cousins who are like that. My aunts wouldn't let them growing up read Harry Potter because, oh, that's Satan worship or whatever her rationale was.
Well, they would do that.
Shouldn't be written about so lightheartedly. They're real. That was her.
They would do that with anything that's popular, but look at how they did that with the Harry Potter books and movies. And then the MCU becomes this sensation, and you don't really see that. And so it's like something happened between the two, because if the MCU had been out and been that popular in the 90s, there would have been all sorts of, especially with characters like Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange and all that.
Yeah.
Well, I think
they would have been all over
kind of shifted.
Cousins of mine are huge Star Wars fans, and I was all like, can't you see how it's pretty much exactly the same thing?
Yeah.
Magic powers, they just don't call it magic. It's the same sort of. In fact, Jedi.
The Force basically is magic. In fact, it's wasn't it Grand Moff Tarkin in the first one who told Darth Vader, "You're the only one who's left of their religion"?
No, that was the guy who was mouthing off to him.
Okay. Well, anyway, one of them referred to Jedi as a religion.
Yeah,
it was religion. Yep. It was supernatural. It was, and then you have, Han Solo, who's the skeptic character. He doesn't believe in it until he actually sees it in action. It was like, okay, I'm convinced by evidence. Force is real.
Ooh, the Metachlorians.
Oh, God.
I don't have a problem with Metachlorians.
I might have mentioned this in previous episodes, but I think what would have made the first Star Wars: A New Hope the best. The one tiny little change, because I think that's such a great movie. I'm kind of a purist in that way, but if they had removed the Force choke, there's that one scene where Vader chokes the person at the table, and if they just removed that, then whether the Force is real or not would be entirely open to the viewer's interpretation. Because that's the only time in the movie where it actually physically manifests. Right?
Well, then you would have to do
Empire, Luke uses the Force to grab a lightsaber. And then I think in every movie since then, they always added a new superpower to the Force.
Especially in the latest trilogy. I mean, they would give the Force a new ability and then forget about it. Because Rey can levitate, but then later on in the movie when she and Kylo Ren could do that and would have done it, all of a sudden they don't.
Right.
Like the.
But my problem with midichlorians is it was, first of all, it was an attempt to explain something that didn't need explaining, and then it didn't really explain it. That's my problem with midichlorians.
Microorganisms that somehow do this.
I think it was probably just, George Lucas had read about mitochondria and was all like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to incorporate that into the movies. That's my guess.
George Lucas
mitochondria, and then the description of metachlorians very much sounds like mitochondria.
Yeah.
When it takes your fan base to reconstruct the original movies, George Lucas has a major case of OCD trying to improve the movie.
Yeah.
But I want to see the despecialized editions, but I would have to buy all of them on like Blu-ray and all that stuff. But I'm just like, I don't know.
Yes, please, Scorch. Yes, please, let's end daylight saving. Just put a stop to it.
It sucks.
Well,
it's magic. I don't have to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the point of a magic system is you don't need to explain it, because if you explain it, then it's not magic, it's science fiction.
Yeah, that's why almost any story about magic I dislike, except for Yudkowsky's Harry Potter fanfic. That one was great because he clearly defined the parameters, and he explained how there really is no difference between science and magic.
Yeah.
Science fantasy, folks. Please stop conflating science fiction with science fantasy.
Yeah.
That's a good, I like that distinction. Yeah, I don't like science fantasy. I do like science fiction. So science fiction would be more on the lines of Andy Weir. Science fantasy would be more along the lines of George, I suppose, or Star Trek.
I need to read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I need to read like some of the classic science fiction.
Great book.
Which a lot of libertarians were science fiction writers.
Oh, yeah. Robert Heinlein, L. Neil Smith. Was Piers Anthony a libertarian?
Well, Heinlein, they tried describing him as a fascist. They tried claiming that Heinlein was a fascist because he did Starship Troopers.
But he wasn't saying that this is an ideal society. He was satirizing that kind of society.
Then, when the movie came out, everybody was going, oh, because of the author's problematic views, they made it a satire instead. And it's like, no, it was always a satire.
It was always a satire.
That's pretty much a thing, how people who kick and scream and yell fascist and who don't realize that they're actually kind of the fascists, it's not surprising at all that they don't understand satire.
Well, because 1984 is a satire, and the big point made at the end of the book is, how Winston Smith was wrong all along and Big Brother is great. He wasn't actually saying that. That was satire. That was, that was his point of view after coming out of Room 101.
Starship Troopers, the thing is, the director of that movie didn't even read the book. He read, like, I think it was the first 3 chapters, then had an assistant just kind of summarize it to him. Then he told the screenwriters to make a movie out of it.
Paul Verhoeven's last good movie was Total Recall. And then he made Showgirls, and everything from Showgirls on has been terrible.
Starship Troopers I do enjoy, just as, you know, it was a film I first watched when I was like 7 years old. My parents had no idea it was rated R, so I watched the full thing without them knowing. Like, they didn't watch me watch it, so I'm seeing all this graphic stuff. So it's kind of nostalgic in my view, but I can see the quirks with it.
I think that might
Fun
have
fact.
been the first
Fun fact,
time
the original cut of RoboCop got an X rating.
I think Starship Troopers, it might have been my first or maybe my second time seeing boobs in a movie. I was like 12 years old or so, and I was like, that's awesome.
Well, they had a co-ed shower scene.
Yes,
like, I watched a co-ed shower scene at 8 years old.
Yeah, and then there was the hookup scene in the tent too. They briefly showed.
Yeah. And for me, when I was a kid, I didn't like I turned out fine. Like, yet you have a lot of people claiming, oh, if kids see these movies and stuff, it's like, first of all, it's up to the parent, and if it's the parent's ignorance or whatever, that's their problem, not the government. But I am glad my parents rented me that movie because I enjoyed it.
All right, guys, we need to wrap it up. It's been fun, but yeah. All right, any final thoughts before we go?
I don't know. Jello Pop is great.
It's kind of weird that the world, like, I was thinking about, you know, what are the odds that there's going to be nuclear war within the next year? I was all like, oh, wow, it's probably, might be less than 1%, but probably not much less than 1%. I was all like, doing a cost benefit analysis of, you know, prepping. I was like, being a little prepared might actually be a sensible thing right now. That's kind of crazy.
JC, there was a scene like that in RoboCop too. The cops' locker rooms were co-ed. And I also think, was it Star Trek 6 when they showed that men and women slept in the same sleeping berths? Not the literal same bed, but in the kind of general quarters.
Sure.
All right.
To see Star Trek.
All right. I'm going to wrap it up then. Thanks, guys, for showing up.
Righty.
And thanks, Chris, for joining us for the first, I don't know, half hour or so. And thanks, everyone in the chat for helping us keep this going. Thank you all for watching. And until next time, stay strong.